So, did you know? The rulebook changed this year. The watch that dominated collector conversations for a decade is gone. Rolex just launched its first entirely new sports collection in years. And a 100-year-old design quietly became one of the smartest buys in the entire catalog. If you're buying a Rolex in 2026 using information from even 2 years ago, you're making decisions in a market that no longer exists. Today, we're ranking the 10 best Rolex watches you can buy in 2026. From the obvious choices everybody talks about to the surprising ones most buyers completely overlook. Number 10. Rolex Explorer I, Ref.
124270.
Here's something most buyers won't find on the first page of any search result. The Explorer is one of the only current Rolex sports references where you can walk into an authorized dealer, pay retail, and walk out the same day. No points system, no relationship, no years-long waitlist, while someone behind a glass counter asks which bag you'd like with that. The 124270 returned to 36 millimeters in 2021, going back to the case size it wore for decades before Rolex expanded it. Caliber 3230 inside, 70 hours of power reserve, plus or minus 2 seconds per day. The dial is 3 Arabic numerals at 3, 6, and 9. Mercedes hands, chromalite lume. That's it. No date, no bezel complication, nothing added to fill space. That restraint is the whole point. There's a specific kind of collector who buys the Explorer, not someone who wants to be noticed, someone who already knows what they have. Pre-owned pricing reflects it. Both the 124270 and the larger 224,270 inches, 40 millimeters, are trading at or slightly below retail right now. In a lineup where almost every desirable reference commands a gray market premium, that's a genuine anomaly worth understanding. It means the watch is priced on what it is, not on what people fear they'll miss if they wait. What I keep returning to is the design's staying power. The Explorer's origin story is mostly mythology. Rolex polished the Everest narrative for years. What's actually true is that the design was arrived at by serious people working in brutal environments, and what they needed looked almost identical to what Rolex still sells today. When a design survives that long without fundamental rethinking, it isn't stubbornness, it's evidence. I think the Explorer is the watch most collectors recommend to other people while quietly hunting something flashier for themselves. That gap between advice and action tells you something about how undervalued it actually is. Picture the person who buys this in 2026 and wears it for 30 years. They'll never explain it to anyone. They won't need to. What's easy to miss in the Explorer conversation is how the reference performs against the wider sports watch market. While the Submariner and GMT operate as status signals, the Explorer operates as a quality signal. The buyer demographic skews toward people who've already owned a flashier watch and traded down to this on purpose. Former Daytona owners who decided they didn't want to think about their watch every time they crossed a border. Former Submariner owners who realized they'd never dived. People who arrived at the Explorer after a longer journey and decided the destination was worth the trip. And the caliber 3230 deserves more than passing mention. The 70-hour power reserve means a watch you take off Friday night is still running Monday morning. That matters practically. It matters even more psychologically. A watch that stops when you're not wearing it is a watch that requires attention. The Explorer doesn't ask for attention. The Explorer rewards patience. Number 9 rewards a different kind of decision, the one about how much you actually need on a dial. Number 9. Rolex Submariner, no date, ref.
124060.
Ask any watch forum, any subreddit, any collector gathering, which Submariner is the right Submariner. The room splits immediately. Date or no date. Always has. Probably always will. The 124060 sits at the cleaner end of that argument. No crown at 3 o'clock, no date window breaking the symmetry of the dial. Just a black ceramic bezel with a 60-minute scale, black dial, applied indices, chromalite hands, and 41 millimeters of oyster steel case. It was the first Submariner to reach that size when Rolex updated the no-date reference in 2020, and the extra millimeter made a visible difference on the wrist, more presence, without crossing into the territory where a watch starts to feel like a statement rather than a tool. The movement is caliber 3230. It shares the Explorer's 70-hour power reserve, running to -2 or +2 seconds per day. The 3230 generation. Submariners represent a genuine mechanical advance over the 3135 they replaced. Better shock resistance, improved regulation architecture, and a more efficient barrel that extends the power reserve without adding a millimeter of case thickness. Rolex doesn't publicize this much, but the watch you buy today is meaningfully more capable than the one your father bought in the 90s. What the no date does that the date version can't, it gives you a completely symmetrical dial. The date window on the 126610LN sits at 3 o'clock and draws your eye before anything else does. Remove it, and the dial becomes a single, unified object. That quality alone, one uninterrupted surface, is why a significant portion of serious collectors, when pressed, name the 124060 as the purer reference. Not because dates are useless, because removing unnecessary information from a watch face is harder to execute than adding it. Secondary market pricing on clean, papered examples runs around $11,000 to $12,000. That's a modest premium over the approximately $9,500 retail. By Submariner standards, that spread is restrained. There's a practical argument for the 124060 that rarely gets made loudly enough. The no-date Submariner is the version most likely to be sitting in the case of an authorized dealer on an ordinary Tuesday. Not because it's less desirable, but because buyers with relationships at dealers tend to push harder for the dated version, the green version, the two-tone version. The 124060 gets slightly less traffic at the allocation stage, which means it's slightly more attainable. In a world where attainability has become a feature in its own right, that matters. Walk-in availability for a watch at this quality level doesn't happen by accident. It sits at 9 rather than higher, because it doesn't carry the color conversation, the 2026 market drama, or the historical weight of the entries above it. But it's one of the best designed objects in the watch world. Sometimes, that's the whole answer. Understated works until you meet the watches that earn their attention honestly. Number 8 just became more relevant overnight. Number 8. Rolex GMT Master 2 Batgirl, Ref 126710 BLNR. The Pepsi is gone. We'll get there. But the discontinuation had a side effect nobody fully anticipated. It made every remaining steel GMT more interesting overnight. The question stopped being which GMT to buy someday. It became which GMT you can actually get. The Batgirl is the blue and black ceramic bezel on the Jubilee bracelet. It's been around since 2019, when Rolex moved the blue and black combination off the Oyster bracelet, where it was called the Batman, and onto the 5-link Jubilee. That bracelet change was more significant than the reference number update. The Jubilee softens the watch considerably. On the Oyster, the Batman read as a tool watch, full stop. Dressy occasion? Wrong watch. On the Jubilee, the same bezel reads as a sophisticated sports watch that disappears equally well under a jacket cuff and a shirt sleeve. Inside is caliber 3285, Rolex's current generation GMT movement. Independently settable local hour hand, 70-hour power reserve, dual time zone display, and Rolex's Parachrom hairspring in a paramagnetic alloy. The practical function is exactly what Pan Am asked Rolex to build in 1954 for their transatlantic flight crews. Show 2 time zones simultaneously, clearly, without additional complication. The blue and black combination reads as dark and versatile. In most lighting conditions, on most wrists, it doesn't announce itself. Some buyers want a watch that announces itself. Others want a watch they can actually wear everywhere, every day, for years, without making a decision about it every morning. The Batgirl is for the second group. With the Pepsi gone and no red bezel replacement shown at Watches and Wonders 2026, the Batgirl is now the consensus steel GMT recommendation. Secondary pricing runs roughly $14,000 to $17,000, depending on condition and date. That's the most accessible blue-chip GMT in the current lineup. There's a version of this conversation that treats the Jubilee bracelet as a dress watch compromise on a sport watch. That version is wrong. The Jubilee is more comfortable on the wrist for all-day wear than the Oyster, full stop. The 5-link construction distributes weight differently, flexes more naturally with hand movement, and reads as less industrial against a sleeve. Rolex added the Jubilee to the Batgirl because it improves the experience of wearing it, not because it softened the design language. The Batman crowd can keep arguing for the Oyster. They're not wrong that it looks more purposeful. They're just choosing a different priority. With the Pepsi gone, the Batgirl and the Batman are both getting more collector attention than they received a year ago. That attention tends to drive premiums. The window where the Batgirl sits at $14,000 to $17,000 may not be permanent. Drop it below. Batgirl or Batman? That argument has been running 6 years. I want to know where you land. The Batgirl is the GMT that survived 2,026 inches good shape. What comes next turned 100 years old, and most people are only just paying attention. Number 7. Rolex Oyster Perpetual Centenary. Ref 126,000-124300. The Oyster case is 100 years old. In 1926, Rolex patented a waterproof wristwatch case at a time when most watches stopped working in the rain. The idea that a mechanism could be sealed from water, dust, and pressure, and that the seal could survive everyday wear across years, wasn't obvious. Other watchmakers thought retail-scale production of a waterproof case was impractical. Rolex proved them wrong, and then spent the next century building every significant watch in their catalog on that foundational architecture. The Centenary Oyster Perpetual, released at Watches and Wonders 2026, carries a 100 years inscription at 6 o'clock where the Swiss-made text normally sits. The flagship piece is the 124,300 inches yellow Rolls-Royce, oyster steel case and bracelet, 18-karat yellow gold bezel and winding crown, slate gray sunray dial, anniversary text printed in Rolex green. Two-tone return to the Oyster Perpetual line specifically for this milestone, deliberately referencing the material configuration of the earliest Oyster references. The broader 2026 OP family went further. A multicolored Jubilee motif dial, 10 colors across a single watch face, that people are comparing to a Warhol canvas. Stone dial versions in solid gold configurations. A general refresh of the palette that makes the 2023 celebration dials look like a warm-up act. But the Centenary piece is the one that carries historical weight. Here's what the Oyster Perpetual gets wrong in most collector conversations. It's treated as the entry-level Rolex, the starter watch, something you buy before you can afford a Submariner. That framing inverts the actual history. Every Submariner, every GMT, every Daytona, they all live inside an architecture this watch established and proved viable. The OP isn't the simplest thing in the catalog. It's the original thing in the catalog. When you buy the Centenary Edition in 2026, you're buying the watch that made the other watches possible. One more thing about the Centenary Edition specifically. The 100 years inscription replaces the Swiss-made text at 6 o'clock. That's an unusual editorial choice for a brand that rarely adds text to a dial. It's not a commemorative medallion on the caseback, not a limited edition engrave on the rotor. They put it on the dial where you'll see it every time you check the time. That's Rolex telling you this matters to them. When a brand as restrained as Rolex breaks its own design conventions to mark a moment, the moment probably deserves acknowledgement. The multicolored Jubilee dial version is also worth a mention. 10 separate dial sectors, each a different color, arranged around the chapter ring. It's the most visually confrontational thing Rolex has put in regular production in years, and the reactions in collector communities have ranged from genuine admiration to genuine bewilderment. Both responses are more interesting than indifference. Watches that divide rooms tend to become collectible faster than watches that don't. You can still get the standard Centenary piece at retail. That particular window doesn't stay open long. A 100-year milestone carries weight, but the next entry has been generating arguments since the week it launched. Number 6 Rolex, GMT Master 2, Sprite, Ref 126720 VTNR. The crown is on the wrong side. That's the first thing most people say. The 126720 VTNR is a left-handed watch, crown at 9 o'clock rather than 3. Designed to be worn on the right wrist so the crown sits clear of your hand instead of pressing into the back of it. Rolex calls the configuration destro, Italian for right, meaning right wrist. It's the first left-handed sport watch Rolex has produced as a standard catalog watch. Nothing else in the current lineup is built this way. The bezel is green and black ceramic. The nickname Sprite arrived in 2022, landing in a GMT family that already had the Pepsi, Batman, Batgirl, Bruce Wayne, and Root Beer to contend with. The green Rolex chose is deep and saturated without reading as synthetic. It sits in the same tonal family as the Submariner Starbucks' bezel, but the combination with black ceramic gives it a denser, more nocturnal quality. Movement is caliber 3285, same specifications as the Batgirl. The distinguishing factor is entirely the case configuration and the bezel choice, but that distinction is significant enough to have attracted a loyal following among buyers who want a GMT that reads as uncommon without requiring an explanation. The destro configuration still divides forums, which is usually a reliable indicator that something interesting is happening. What makes the Sprite specifically worth discussing in 2026 is where it sits in the lineup. Among the surviving steel GMTs, it saw the smallest retail price increase in 2025 and trades at the more accessible end of the secondary market, roughly $16,000 to $19,000, a meaningful discount from where the Pepsi was trading in its final months. For a buyer who wants a steel GMT with genuine character and isn't prepared to pay a distress premium on a discontinued reference, the Sprite is the intelligent alternative that isn't loud enough about itself. The destro configuration also solves a genuine ergonomic problem that most right-handed watch wearers have quietly accepted. The standard crown at 3 o'clock on a right wrist watch presses against the back of the hand during normal wrist flexion. Most people stop noticing it after a few weeks. But when they try on a destro watch for the first time, the absence of that pressure is immediately noticeable. The Sprite was designed to be worn on the right wrist, which moves the crown entirely clear of the hand. For buyers who've worn a standard sports watch daily for years, this is either a compelling improvement or something they've never thought about. The ones who've thought about it tend to become Sprite converts. Resale pricing confirms it. Among the surviving steel GMTs, the Sprite has the smallest gap between retail and what pre-owned examples actually change hands for. Distinct design language at an accessible entry point. That combination is rarer than it sounds in the current Rolex lineup. The people who wear the Sprite tend to know exactly why they chose it. That quiet certainty is its own kind of appeal. The Sprite earns its place quietly. The next watch earns it loudly, and the secondary market has been agreeing for 5 years. Number 5, Rolex Submariner, date Starbucks, ref 126610LV. The Hulk is gone. The Cookie Monster, the white gold blue dialed Submariner ref 126619LB, was discontinued at Watches and Wonders 2026, and the Starbucks is still here. Green ceramic bezel, green dial, 41mm oyster steel case, and oyster bracelet. The 126610LV launched in 2020 as the successor to the aluminium bezel Kermit from the early 2000s. And collectors who remembered what happened to Kermit prices after its own discontinuation paid close attention from launch week. The Starbucks carried a gray market premium early and has maintained it consistently. The watch chart's Submariner index sits around $18,700 as of mid-2026. Green dial references have tracked above the overall baseline since 2020. That's not a coincidence. It reflects real and sustained demand from buyers who want a Submariner that reads as distinct within the steel sports watch category. Something that says Submariner to anyone who knows watches, but doesn't say the exact same thing as the black dial version on every wrist in the room. The 126610LV is powered by caliber 3235, the same current generation movement as the black dial references, with the same 300-meter water resistance, the same oyster case, the same bracelet engineering. The green is not a novelty on top of a serious watch. It is a color choice within an otherwise serious watch, and the distinction matters for understanding why the premium holds. Here's the observation I keep coming back to. The Cookie Monster was discontinued this year. The Hulk was discontinued in 2020. Both were green-accented submariners, with secondary premiums that kept climbing after their exits. The Starbucks is the current green sub. Rolex has a pattern. You can decide for yourself what to do with it. Remember the forward feint from earlier, the Cookie Monster discontinuation. It just paid off. One observation that doesn't appear in most coverage. The Starbucks is the only current steel submariner with a dial and bezel that match. The 126610LN has a black bezel over a black dial. The 124060 has the same. The Starbucks is the only configuration where the ceramic bezel color carries across to the dial itself, giving the watch a unified, intentional look that the black versions don't attempt. That visual coherence is part of why it reads as distinct rather than just different. The Starbucks rewards people who looked at the green dial and decided they liked what it said about them, rather than waiting for the market to give them permission. 5 makes the argument. 4 changes the technical conversation entirely. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 4. Rolex Land Dweller, Ref. 127334. In March 2025, Rolex introduced a watch that didn't exist before. Not an update, not a new reference inside an existing family. A brand new model line, the first since the Sky Dweller in 2012, built around a movement the brand had filed 16 patents to protect. The Land Dweller divided collectors immediately. The honeycomb dial texture, with oversized numerals at 6 and 9, is either a bold departure from Rolex convention or a polarizing oddity, depending entirely on who you're asking. The integrated flat Jubilee bracelet, sleek, tapered, architecturally new, drew immediate comparisons to the Royal Oak and the Nautilus. 2 integrated bracelet icons that had dominated the sport luxury segment while Rolex watched. Collectors interpreted that as Rolex deciding it had watched long enough. The real story was always the movement. Caliber 7135, an indirect impulse, double-wheel escapement constructed entirely in silicon, the Dynapulse, running at 5 Hz, 36,000 beats per hour, a frequency more commonly associated with chronographs than everyday wear references. Ceramic balance pivot, paramagnetic silicon hairspring, 66 hours of power reserve, an open sapphire caseback, the first on any Rolex in standard production, 16 patents on the movement alone, 32 connected to the watch overall. By the technical standards of what Rolex has produced at scale in the modern era, this is a different category of achievement from anything they've released in decades. Secondary market premiums peaked above 150% over retail in the months after launch. By mid-2026, that fever has cooled considerably. The 127,334 inches steel and white gold, the steel-dominant reference, now trades around $39,000 against a $15,350 retail. Still a significant premium, but a real compression from the launch frenzy. The cooling has a meaning. The flippers are largely out. What remains is demand from people who want to wear it. That shift is when a watch transitions from hype piece to collection anchor. Many specialists believe the Caliber 7135 platform will migrate into other Rolex models in the years ahead. If that's correct, the earliest Land Dwellers carry first-generation significance. That's not guaranteed. But it's exactly the right question to be asking now, not in 3 years. The Land Dweller rewrote what Rolex can put inside a case. Number 3 is what most people picture when they close their eyes and think Rolex. Number 3, Cosmograph Daytona Steel, Ref. 126500LN. Every serious watch conversation eventually arrives here. The Daytona is the most consistently searched Rolex model across Google Trends, going back 5 years running. Chrono24 named it the Rolex, with the greatest price appreciation since 2019 at 88%. The watch chart's Daytona index sat at $44,839 as of late May 2026, against a steel retail of roughly $16,900. That gap doesn't need interpretation. It speaks for itself. The 126500LN is a 40mm chronograph with a black Cerachrom ceramic bezel, black dial, and 3 white subsidiary registers at 3, 6, and 9. Caliber 4000, 130 inside. An in-house movement Rolex developed specifically for the Daytona when they decided the Abosh they had been sourcing was no longer consistent with where the brand was going. The 4130 is a vertical clutch chronograph movement. Specialists who have serviced both generations describe it as one of the most reliable chronograph movements in production at any price point, full stop. There are 2 Daytona stories running simultaneously, and they've never agreed with each other. The first is the motorsport story. Sir Malcolm Campbell writing to Rolex after victories at Daytona Beach, the watch becoming synonymous with precision timing in the 60s when amateur racers needed a reliable wrist-mounted chronograph. Clean, purposeful, designed around a specific function. The second story is the financial one. Gray market premiums, authorized dealer waitlists measured in years, and secondary prices that make the retail figure feel theoretical for most buyers. For most people watching this, the 126500LN is not a purchase decision, it's an aspiration. The authorized dealer waitlist for a steel Daytona runs from 2 to 5 years depending on city and relationship. The gray market options start around $38,000 to $40,000 on any given day. So the question of which version of the watch you'd prefer, black dial versus white dial, oyster bracelet versus oyster flex, ceramic bezel versus the older stainless configuration, is almost theoretical for most buyers. You take the one you can get, when you can get it. That reality is worth sitting with for a moment. The most coveted watch in the Rolex catalog is one that most of its admirers have never had a realistic opportunity to purchase at retail. The desire exists entirely independently of access. There are people who've been on a single dealer's waitlist for the Daytona for 4 years and check in every quarter, not because they've forgotten, because they're still waiting. And then Watches and Wonders 2026 arrived with the Rulesium enamel reference and recast even the steel version as the accessible Daytona. We'll get there in 60 seconds. But the 126500LN belongs at 3, because it represents the most consistently desired version of the most coveted watch in the catalog. If you have access at retail, you already know what to do. The problem has always been access. Wanting a Daytona is universal. Getting one is something else. What comes next isn't available in any dealer's case at all. Number 2. GMT Master 2, Pepsi, Ref. 126710 BLRO, discontinued April 2026. On the opening morning of Watches and Wonders 2026 inches Geneva, the GMT Master 2 Pepsi disappeared from Rolex.com. No press release, no announcement, no farewell. The product page for the 126710 BLRO returned a single line. This page is not available. The white gold ref 126719 BLRO went the same way. Both gone simultaneously. Authorized dealers had been telling waitlist customers since early 2026 that no further deliveries were coming. An authorized Rolex dealer in Grand Cayman reportedly confirmed the halt to a customer in February, months before Geneva made it official. Secondary market prices had been climbing in response to the circulating rumors, and climbed again once rumor became confirmed fact. For the first time in the Cerachrom era, the current steel Rolex catalog contains no red bezel. The Pepsi's run began in 2014, when Rolex solved the technical challenge of producing a stable 2-color ceramic insert, a single piece of Cerachrom in both red and blue, which require fundamentally different sintering temperatures. The solution was a manufacturing achievement independent of the watch around it. For most of the production run, the 126710 Bluro traded at more than double its retail price. Pre-owned examples regularly clearing $24,000 to $26,000 against a roughly $12,000 retail. A watch that sustains that kind of spread for that long stops being a conventional retail product. It becomes a cultural object. Rolex tends to remove those from circulation eventually. The parallel everyone reaches for is the Hulk, the green-dialed Submariner Ref. 116,610. LV discontinued in 2020. When the Hulk left the catalog, it was already the most discussed steel sports Rolex on the market. Secondary values rose steadily in the years after, and collectors who never secured one at retail began treating it as a grail piece. The Hulk was eventually replaced. As of Watches and Wonders 2026, the Pepsi has not been. The expected Coke, a red and black ceramic bezel that Rolex appeared to be developing based on a 2022 patent filing, never showed up in Geneva. So the question, in 2026, is not whether the Pepsi is desirable. It obviously is. The question is whether you pay an elevated and moving secondary premium on a discontinued reference with no announced replacement. In a market significantly more sober than the 2020 to 2022 environment, when the last discontinuation frenzy played out. Tim Bender, founder of the pre-owned platform Collected, said it plainly. Many speculative buyers were burned badly during the peak frenzy and never came back. I wouldn't chase it at these prices, but I understand completely why some people will. The Pepsi's exit is the biggest story in Rolex in 2026. But number one isn't available in any dealer's case. You'd need to know somebody who knows somebody. Number 1, Cosmograph Daytona, Rolesium Enamel, Ref 126502, not in catalog. Rolex debuted this watch at Watches and Wonders 2026 and placed it on the Exceptional Watches page, not the standard catalog. Off-catalog Rolex pieces are allocated through select boutiques to clients with the deepest purchase histories. They don't appear in dealer cases. They're not available to walk-in customers. Money alone doesn't get you one. The 126502 is, at first glance, a familiar silhouette, 40 millimeters, Daytona case, recognizable from across a room. But the execution is unlike anything Rolex has brought to a steel reference before. The case is Rolesium, primarily oyster steel, with platinum components across the bezel, lugs, and caseback. The bezel itself is constructed from tungsten-rich ceramic, edged with a band of polished platinum with horizontal numerals on the tachymeter scale that deliberately echo the design language of the very first Daytona references from the early 1960s. The caseback is sapphire, open, functioning as a display back. The third Daytona ever made with an exhibition caseback, and the first steel reference to receive one. And then there is the dial, Grand Few enamel, white, fired vitreous enamel applied in layers, fired in a kiln repeatedly at high temperatures, finished by hand. Rolex has historically avoided the process. It's variable, handcraft dependent, resistant to the industrial scale the brand is built on. Yield rates are low. Consistency across a production run requires a level of artisanal oversight that sits in real tension with how Rolex prefers to operate. That they chose to apply it here, on a Daytona, on the watch that already concentrates more collector attention than anything else in the catalog, is a statement about where the brand sees its ceiling. Specialists expect secondary market pricing to exceed $100,000 within the first year. Based on how previous off-catalog Daytonas have performed, that estimate is probably conservative. Most people watching this will never see one in person. That's not a criticism. It's part of what makes it the right watch for this slot. Because the 126502 isn't just a watch, it's Rolex making a visible declaration. Less volume, richer materials, higher standards at the top. The tightened superlative chronometer certification announced alongside the full 2026 collection is part of the same signal. The brand is narrowing its definition of what a Rolex is allowed to aspire to be. The Rolesium Daytona is the clearest version of that aspiration ever produced in steel, and the collector community is nowhere near done talking about it. I have talked about these 10 watches, but the real question underneath all of them is simpler than any reference number. Rolex has been building this case quietly for 100 years. A watch is a decision you make once and live with for a very long time. The watches generating the most conversation in 2026 are the ones where that principle collided with something unexpected, A sudden discontinuation, a technical leap that changed what a movement can do. A centenary that reframed what the simplest watch in the catalog actually means. An off-catalog rarity that reminded everyone what the ceiling looks like when Rolex decides to show it. Buy the one you'll still want in 30 years. That's always been the right answer. It just takes a while to figure out which one that is. Which one would you actually pull the trigger on today? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe.